Alright, so normally I try not to spend too much time rambling, but after spending a decent amount of time with this amp, here's some complete rambling about this without any supporting audio. Been using the Positive Grid Spark for a while now. I like it. It's not perfect. Like a bunch of other people have noticed, this thing gets really bass heavy. In most presets, I find I'm taking most preamps, I'm taking the bass and just rolling it literally all the way down to get it down to an acceptable level. Mids and treble are okay. It's a little bit dark, but that's how I'm using it, because I'm mostly using it as a desktop amplifier. The reason I feel like Positive Grid puts so much bass in this amp is so that way you can take this tiny little amp outside and not have to worry about actually being heard and having an incredibly thin sound. If you take this out on the back porch, and like I tend to put it on a stool when I'm out on the back porch, you actually get a pretty full bass sound. It sounds really nice. So I see why they gave it so much bass in the presets. I do feel like after using it for a while, the knobs on the top are practically useless. I almost always just go through the amp and ignore these. Mostly because the other thing is, if I'm playing in the amp, every time you change amplifier models, it resets the EQ to whatever it thinks the default for that preset should be. Kind of annoying. I also almost never use this rotary dial. I see why it's there. They're intending this to be a welcome to guitar kind of amp, and for a kid who doesn't, or any young guitarist, young as in years of playing, this is just easier, and this katana style knob makes sense. Catch is, it seems like every time you turn the amplifier back on, it's going to default it back to preset 1, which is fine, but it's a little annoying at the same time. As far as using this as a Bluetooth speaker, it's nice, but it would be nice for this to be slightly larger than a tiny little sub pot off of a $10 Amazon Newix pedal. As far as the effects inside this box go, they're pretty decent. I find I struggle with making the reverbs happy with myself. They're too clangy, too brash, too much reverb going on. Generally, I'll turn off the reverb almost entirely and maybe use some delay. Modulation, pretty decent. The tuner, I actually would prefer a little segmented LED here to tell you what note it was picking up on, because let's be honest, if you're targeting a young guitarist and you're putting in a tuner function, that's great, but nowhere in here or in the app, and granted, holding down to get the tuner should push into the amplifier a tuner, like the Boss Tuner app or the Pano Tuner app. Frankly, using this as a tuner, works fine as long as you already know what note you're on. If you're an inexperienced guitarist, it is very easy to, after a weather change, if your guitar has gone basically a half step out of tune, it's very easy to find yourself in half E flat and half standard tuning. That's got to be frustrating for a beginning guitarist. When I've been playing exhausted and not paying close attention, I've ended up a half step off with their tuner, and after that just gave up and used a tuner app on my phone, which, by the way, download a tuner app on your phone if you're new to guitar and watching this. Things that I feel are missing from this, I think the pre-gain pedals are a decent selection, but in addition to a straight up clean boost, one of the things that this amplifier really needs is a treble booster. The two Marshall models in here are pretty nice, but they would really benefit from having something like this as opposed to a tube screamer inside the software. Get some really high treble, cut a lot of the bass out of the signal going into the amplifier, and really get kind of that vintage Marshall roar with the Dallas Rangemaster treble booster in front of it. Same thing, the Vox preset. Excellent preset. Love the Vox in this thing. Could really stand to use a true treble booster inside the software on the scene to really get that Brian May going. The other thing that this amplifier is really great for, it's a straight up amplifier. I've actually got to get around to doing it, setting one of the presets instead of some reverbed out over semi-saturated gain preset with everything off, every modulation, compressor, everything, switch it off and use it straight up as an FR/FR or full range frequency response to stick something like a Boss GT1 in the front of it. Boss GT1, never really cared for this pedal running into a guitar amp. Really struggled with getting things balanced out, making everything work together. Switch this to just FR/FR, turn everything off inside the amp, and just literally just use the master output control. Putting this into it works much better. And highly recommend, if you've got any kind of Boss product like that, Boss multi-effects pedal, trying it out with an amplifier this way, because definitely worth your time and investment. Overall, would I buy it again? Probably sure. Is it better than the Boss Katana? Is it better than the Yamaha offering? Yeah. Depends on what you're using it for. I like using the app. For just jamming, I'm not super fond of it. For exploring tones, because I'm not a rich man and don't have a truly vast amplifier library, I'm never gonna shell out for a Soldano. It's pretty decent that way, and it does model some kind of unique amplifiers. Some of the amplifiers in particular that it does the vintage amplifiers really well, as one would expect. Some of the modern amplifiers, varying degrees of success. The model of the PV6505 or the 5150 or the EVH isn't that great, and I think Boss does it better with the GT1. Meanwhile, the Soldano, kind of a wash. This compares more to the Soldano amplifiers I've heard called out as Soldano compared to what the Boss does. Personally, Boss's Soldano model I like a little bit more, but that's just personal taste. This does seem decently accurate. But again, with all the high gain amplifiers, this bass knob is rolled all the way off, and I still feel like when I'm using this on my desktop, I could use a little less bass. Again, I could use a true treble booster in the software, so that way boost the highs, cut the lows, because a lot of these high gain amplifiers do seem dark. They're kind of missing that sizzle and still have some of that digital artifacting at the high end that doesn't sound great. So not perfect, but for what it is, it's really good. And you have the bonus of you get an FR/FR speaker if you set up a preset for it.